It's a very complex question because there are many of these questions, and it's hard to identify just one or two singular ones. Clearly, one is what happens in terms of consumption, what happens in terms of public health effects, as well as in terms of broader incarceration or public health, spread of diseases. But equally, the experimentation needs to consider what kind of law enforcement systems will be needed to effectively enforce the new regulation. It's not simply sufficient to say, if, for example, there were a legal market in marijuana, that implies that there is no need for law enforcement. In fact, law enforcement might become more complicated, more complex, certainly different than what we have seen so far. How do we prepare? How do we imagine this kind of law enforcement? How do we interact with communities as well as with law enforcement officials, whether they are police or whether the industry is self-policing itself, etc. So the need is to think not just about the impact in terms of consumption and health, but equally the impact in terms of criminal markets and enforcement. I guess I would add to that it's critical to build monitoring by outsiders. And by outsiders, I don't mean other countries necessarily, but someone who is not designing the policy and not enforcing the policy into the experimentation. Because many of these are brand new. We are imagining outcomes, but we cannot be certain that these outcomes will in fact materialize. And it's very easy not to anticipate some of the good outcomes, or for that matter, not to anticipate the costs. And so to design flexibility into policy, as excruciatingly difficult as it is, and to design systematic monitoring and smart measures, smart reporting mechanism is as important as the regulation itself. So often regulations and institutions are like toothpaste. Once you squeeze it out of the tube, it's really difficult to get it back in, and they might be out for decades. We have seen it disastrously with how drug policies have been structured, and it took decades and decades of effort to dissipate the paste, if not push it back into the tube. But we run similar risks with other policy. It's easy to imagine new regulation, hard to roll it back if it's not panning out.